Major funding for these broadcasts has been provided by grants from Madison Realty Capital, New York Community Bank, M&T Bank, AmTrust Title, Customers Bank, Ariel Property Advisors, Capital One Bank, Sterling National Bank, Marks Paneth LLP, Meridian Capital Group. Additional funding has been provided by grants from Amarant Bank, AVR Realty Company, Bank of America Merrill Lynch, Briarwood Organization, B6 Real Estate Advisors, CBRE, Chase Commercial Term Lending, Chase Mortgage Lending, Citizens Bank, Collins Building Services, CPEX Real Estate Services, Douglaston Development, Levine Builders, Flushing Bank, Friedman LLP, Handro Properties Handler Real Estate Organization, Hodges Ward Elliott INC, Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, John Casamatidis Red Apple Group, Kilroy Architectural Windows, Matone Group, Newmark Knight Frank, Optimum Window Manufacturing Corp., People's United Bank, Rockefeller Group, Rosewood Realty Group, RPW Group, SJP Properties, Stonehenge NYC, TD Bank, Terra CRG, the Merringore Family Foundation, and these friends. It's called the Garden State, and there's lots of things taking place over there. But one thing that's really taking place is a significant amount of residential development. So today, with the help of my favorite executive producer, Deb, I put together a group of bankers, real estate owners, and developers to discuss what's happening in the residential market in the Garden State of New Jersey. As I said, my executive producer and friend, Deb Tantliff, who is the principal of Tantum Real Estate.
Pleasure.
Jim Morris, who is the group manager for commercial real estate at M&T Bank. David Genova, who is a principal at Greenwood. And last but not least, the man who spends some time in New Jersey and some time in New York, Brian Sharipka, who is a senior vice president at iStar. So Asbury Park is seeing a resurrection. Mm-hmm. What's iStar doing in Asbury Park?
Thank you, for having us today. I think Asbury Park is going through a renaissance that's really long overdue. And so iStar's role is we serve as master developer of the waterfront area. So it's about 54 developable acres between Ocean Grove to the south and Allenhurst and Deal to the north. And of that 54 acres, iStar owns about 35. So about 70% of the developable property in that waterfront area.
And what is on that acreage before you took over?
Well, I think this is a process that's been a long time in coming. I think everybody on this panel knows Asbury Park very, very well. And, this is a redevelopment that started back in the mid-1980s and for various reasons just never really happened. And so while other areas of New Jersey were experiencing tremendous growth and rebirth, Asbury Park really didn't follow along. And so iStar became involved, I guess about 8 years ago in taking over as master developer. But primarily it was, at the time we took over, it was vacant land, old buildings that had been boarded up along the waterfront. There were some areas of the downtown that were sort of, already starting to redevelop, but primarily vacant land.
And what type of projects has iStar built so far, and what are the initial plans for the next couple of years?
So we have entitlements for over 3,000 residential units and about 400,000 square feet of retail with our partner at Madison Marquette along the boardwalk. Over the past few years, we have built for-sale townhomes, for-sale condominiums. We have built the Asbury Hotel, which was actually named America's best boutique hotel by USA Today back in 2016.
You built it, are you operating it, or?
We actually have a development partner, David Bowd of Salt Hotels. So David is a minority partner in the hotel, but primarily, iStar is the majority owner there. We also just recently reopened Asbury Lanes, a music and bowling venue, about 12,000 square feet, that has its roots, back to the 1960s. So we've done a little bit of everything, for sale housing, and right now our biggest, what I'd call our flagship property in the market is called Asbury Ocean Club. It's a 500,000 gross square foot building, mixed use.
On the water?
On the waterfront. It's about 1 block off the water. It's the site of the former C8 or Esperanza. So this particular site has been undeveloped for 35 years, and I think most people associate it, unfortunately, with sort of failed redevelopment. So we're building a 17-story tower there, just over 500,000 square feet.
And it's a for sale?
For sale, so 130 residential condos, 54 hotel keys, 22,000 square feet of retail.
Now the hotel keys are keys, or is it a timeshare also?
No, it's each use is distinct. So we feel very strongly that condos in the for sale space, we've seen what happens when the condo hotel combination goes bad. We think that for Asbury Park, we think condominiums are separate from the hotels.
Now, not far away, this young lady over here, my producer over here, is involved with Redbank. Okay, another Monmouth company. Tell me what you're doing in Redbank.
So Redbank, it's a great urban light market in suburban Monmouth County. We are working on a project right a few hundred feet off of the main street in downtown, across the street from the Navesink River and the Riverside Garden Park. And it's a boutique asset. It's about 35 units, 4-story building. But the important part of the project is it's the first redevelopment plan in the history of the borough. And Redbank is representative of what a lot of communities throughout New Jersey are going through in terms of their planning initiatives, where they're really starting to proactively look at their master plans and their zoning and their planning in an attempt to address.
Yeah, is Redbank or other towns doing similar to what iStar became the master developer in Asbury Park? Are there other developments at Jim that you see where there's master developers being designated in certain communities?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's plenty of communities where it's occurred, and there's some really interesting, neat projects that are coming on board, and I think that's just one example of a great project. I live not far from Redbank. I'm the town over, so I get to see it every morning when I'm driving in, and it's great to see it coming to to the stage that it's at right now.
I had read this report saying that rental housing is in New Jersey is the 6th highest charge in the country. I mean, that's a designation that most people wouldn't like because it makes it unaffordable. Why is that situation that way?
If you look into the Jersey City market, Hoboken, you might see rents pushing $50, over $50 a square foot, and you can go into other markets and they could be new product with great amenities and good layouts, can be in the low 30s. But when you compare it with the competition of Brooklyn or New York City, it's quite affordable. And a lot of projects have had the ability to have folks from the city that are being priced out to move into some really neat projects that have a lot of amenities and have the same infrastructure in terms of.
But you see, when we're talking about Asbury Park and we're talking about Redbank, even though they are viable coming into New York City, they are a relatively long trip, okay? Mm-hmm. Asbury Park and Redbank are probably a good hour away by mass transportation over there. Mm-hmm. Now you have something in Montclair. What are you doing in Montclair?
Montclair, we're about 60% complete with our partners at Sterling Properties on a 46-unit luxury apartment building right on the train station at the Bay Street train station. Montclair is a unique town. It has 6 train stations in the town, of which I think almost everybody in town commutes to New York from one of those train stations. 4 of them really aren't developable. They're in real residential neighborhoods, and 2 of them kind of are in the downtown. We're right on one of those. But we're surprised in our interest level and we're fielding inquiries now. A lot of it is downsizing and not commuting on that project, which is not something I would have predicted 2 years ago. People who still go to New York.
When you bring up downsizing, brings up an interesting topic which relates maybe a little bit to Asbury Park and also maybe to Redbank. people like the water, okay? How many of the people in the initial development, and what's your thoughts on how many people are going to be there full-time or are going to really only use it, like the Margate developments near Atlantic City, which probably have a 30% occupancy in the winter and 100% occupancy in the summer?
We do see a lot of second home buyers right now in Asbury Park as we build some of the newer projects. But I think there's also an influx of what we call transitional buyers. People who are coming from Essex County or other towns up north. They're familiar with they're very familiar with New Jersey. They're watching what's happening in communities like Asbury Park or maybe Long Branch just north. And maybe they're empty nesters or soon to be, and they're sort of going to transition from that suburban single-family home to something close to the water.
Because I could see with the aging baby boomer and with people downsizing, I can see a substantial number of people who would be in other parts of New Jersey who want to have the opportunity of having the shore, who want to have the opportunity to be near their families, and relocate specifically to Monmouth and Ocean County for that. The same way I think in Long Branch happened with Pier Village and other developments over there. I think that. What's your thoughts, Deb?
I think it ties into your comment before about the housing affordability in New Jersey. So we're in a housing climate right now where there's a tremendous amount of capital. There's an extraordinary volume of inventory that's both in the construction pipeline and in the planning pipeline as a result of legislative initiatives with respect to affordable housing. And we're in a really interesting demographic shift in the state where we're facing out-migration, but we have a lot of really quality empty nester baby boomers who would love nothing more than to stay in their communities and still have these really dynamic lifestyles. So I think you're seeing a shift in the resident demographic where in the last few years there's been a tremendous amount of talk of the millennial, but I think now the conversation is shifting a lot more and paying a lot more attention to the baby boomer demographic because that demographic is capable of sustaining a certain rent.
I think a great example of that is look at the influx of housing that people from other parts of maybe New Brunswick, East Brunswick, Cranberry, moving into the Monroe, which is probably a 55 and older community. It's really like that, and that's what the majority of the area. People wanted to downsize. They wanted to get rid of their two-story colonial to be on a split level or to be on with the housing on a lower level. So that's an important point. I see that in the Ocean County Monmouth market over there, but I also see a significant amount of transit-oriented development. How's the bank look at transit-oriented development?
It's been a key driver for a lot of residential development. We've done one just recently in Aberdeen, which is not far north of it's in Monmouth County, but not far north of Redbank. It's 2 or 3 stops north of Redbank. And it's doing really well. Absorption numbers are really good. But you can go all around the state, and every train station as you go around the state that's developed new housing has done extremely well. Eric did a project in Redbank, right near the train station, and did extremely well. It's the transitory development that started a couple years ago is really becoming the lifeblood of sort of driving residential development in the state.
Well,
so
what are we seeing today in Bayonne? Lots of talk about Bayonne.
We just got credit approval for a project, and we'll probably be closing before the end of the year for something in Bayonne. Eric Whitmont, who we were talking about before, has a project in Bayonne as well. There's a lot of new housing going in. The ferry terminal will be opening, I think, in the first quarter of next year, which will be a link into the city. And for an area that you might look at and say doesn't have a lot of available land, they've created these little pockets, and there's a lot of new housing that's going in. It's real exciting.
Yes, we were involved in about 30 acres on the military terminal in Bayonne, which is a mix of retail and residential. And Bayonne is a more affordable option to Jersey City or to Montclair with great mass transit access.
Now, where are the people who are living in Bayonne and Montclair and your other project, which I want you to talk about, where are they working?
The people in Montclair work kind of all over the place. I mean, to west to Morristown, but also east to New York. New York being the large driver, I think.
Right.
And Montclair's train station is only about a 35-minute trip into New York. So it's doable compared to some of the other ones that I think are on transit lines but aren't quite as
Now,
accessible.
the project you're doing with Brookfield, where is that? And tell,
So I'm one of the owners of the Wellmont Theater with Brookfield and Pinnacle Companies. Brian Stoller, you're
different
Another
Stolar.
and that project is part of an arts-based redevelopment district that was really the mayor's vision about 7 years ago to expand the arts residential and office use and create not a downtown like Livingston downtown, but something hip, something fun, and extend the retail corridor of Bloomfield Avenue a little bit further, and really create what at the time in his vision was the first large-scale rental complex on Bloomfield Avenue. It's actually the second because one beat us to that designation, but the Wellmont Theater, which is a large concert venue, is now, similar to Asbury Park, driving some of the retail and people and helping us
Right.
put together this.
Isn't that similar to what happened in Redbank?
Yeah, so the
Redbank?
Count Basie Theater in Redbank is undergoing a major expansion and renovation. And it was interesting, we were talking in the green room, Asbury's a little bit different, where the entertainments and the arts and the restaurants and that commercial entertainment scene came first prior to any sort of real full-time residential density. Unlike some of the other communities you see in New Jersey where it's the residential density that drives the ability to create those sustainable complementary uses.
What are we seeing in towns like Hackensack? There was limited or no development for, let's say, 20, 25 years. Today, there is some new development taking place, right?
I think Hackensack is representative of what's happening throughout the state. You have a number of communities where for a decade or two, there was little activity, zero rent growth, and all of a sudden they have hundreds, if not thousands of units in their immediate pipeline or in their 3 to 5 mile radius. And that's all really pushing to, what is the price point diversity? What is the housing affordability? There's a tremendous amount of inventory in the pipeline. There's certainly a demand to meet it. The question is going to be at what volume and at what pace and at what rents.
My ears opened when you said tremendous amount of product in the pipeline. You're the banker over there. When you hear the term tremendous amount in the
It used to
pipeline,
scare me more than it does now.
right? No, but it's like a tale of two cities.
Right.
It's good and it's bad.
I think when you're talking about developing cities and bringing a target market to your city, I think having the amount of volume drives a lot of that. And I think that's what you'll see in Hackensack. I think that's what you see down in Asbury Park, and Montclair's already been established. But all these markets that are sort of going through a second life, and as the new units are coming in, more supply is not always a bad thing. It's actually a pretty good thing because it's driving traffic to it. And it's
Brian, does iStar have plans for other parts in New Jersey?
Primarily on the lending side, I would say that's where our focus is outside of Asbury Park. I mean, we own, given our land holdings and our investment, the capital investment we have in Asbury. On the development side, we're really focused on northern Monmouth County and Asbury Park specifically. But I think we still look for opportunities across New Jersey and in New York and other markets throughout the country where we can work with development partners or other financing sources to sort of partner to provide solutions for clients. I think that there were some very interesting points that, with respect to rentals. I mean, I think rentals are a really important part about creating diversity of housing product, affordability. And from our perspective, in our development experience, we need rentals to serve as feeders into the condominium space. So, and the retail, right? I mean, in Asbury Park, the retail did come first, and I think has been one of the struggles with that submarket. Is just how can you bring critical mass online very quickly?
Another topic which is really large in New Jersey is adaptive reuse. You take into consideration the military base at Fort Monmouth, which closed. Fort Monmouth was huge. The Bell Labs is another example.
the LaRoche factory up on Route 3. Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of projects that are campus sort of areas that are being redeveloped, and a lot of them require a lot of capital in order to do so. And Monmouth, I live not far from Monmouth, so I can speak to that one specifically. There's a lot of different developers that are going in and sort of carving it up, and it's a matter of how the puzzle sort of comes together, and does it come together thoughtfully, and does it all sort of work? But there's been some great successes with some of the...
I mean, we have Professor Tatliff over there, who's part of the Rutgers Real Estate Institute. How do they look at the adaptive reuse of properties?
Well, we're not making any more land, so adaptive reuse becomes a critical part of redevelopment. So, you spoke about Aberdeen's, the successful project you did there with B&E. That project would not be the success that it is without Bell Works. Bell Works is now a major employment driver in Monmouth County, which is allowing communities like Asbury to expand their pipeline. It's allowing communities like Keyport, like Keansburg, communities that historically after Sandy were desolated, are now in a position to really say, we have an employment driver here, we need housing because you can live here and work here.
I'm going to give you a major employment driver in New Jersey, Monmouth Racetrack. In a consideration of not the racetrack, but in consideration of the sports gaming business, which has increased over there. An enormous sports betting market, which is in that market. It's helping the community. I think it's going to have an effect on Asbury. Certain of the executives or the people who live there who like going to sports betting. You could bet anyway, but people like going to the sports arenas, like going to the casino.
You're making the connection of all of the different components of lifestyle and what that makes to make for a successful suburban community. Because there's only one Jersey City, there's only one Newark, right? We are a state of suburban towns.
Okay, so what's going on in Newark? I mean,
a lot. Great stuff.
Okay, are you developing in Newark?
No, so we have the privilege as a result of being a woman business enterprise, we get brought in through the advisory arm of our company. Cities like Newark, cities like Jersey City make very earnest initiatives to have developers work with minority and women businesses. So we wind up doing consulting on a number of capacities on a number of different projects. Newark is a fascinating market where there's office adaptive reuse happening. There's new residential high-rise construction for the first time in decades.
The first one, the Dranoff building.
It's beautiful.
30 years.
It's beautiful, and the rents are Jersey City rents. And you have a great access to NJ and mass transit and the Whole Foods and downtown Newark and the arena and Manhattan.
The Ironbound section.
And the Ironbound, who doesn't love good Portuguese food. But this speaks to all of the complementary uses and housing product diversity. And without that diversity, we will not have housing affordability.
So I want to ask the banker, what's your thoughts about Newark in the residential development? Because it did take 30 years for the first new apartment house to be opened up. There had been adaptive reuse, going back a number of years ago before the recession.
Yeah, no, we're excited by it as well. I mean, I think there's a lot of great things that are going on, and I think as more development comes on, it's just going to continue to drive success of the city. And if you even go beyond Newark and you go into Harrison, some of the areas that are immediately adjacent to it, there's a lot of new housing product that's coming in. It's going to drive a lot of population growth there, and it's exciting.
What about the redevelopment of some of the malls? I believe the office building near the Short Hills Mall. Do you see more of that taking place in the state? The retail and some of the office buildings which aren't needed? Brian?
Absolutely. I mean, we look at the northern Monmouth County market, and we look at, I believe it's Kushner and Rouse have, a large redevelopment, a large project that's redeveloping the mall in that area just north of Asbury Park. And I think so when you're looking at the inflow of capital into, I think as developers, we look at specific submarkets today, and maybe even on the finance side, you have to drill down to that granular level. You're looking at submarket compared to submarket. But when you take that step back and you look at the inflow of capital into certain geographic regions of the state, I think these are very, very positive trends. And I think, Deb hit on a very important point that I think makes each submarket is going to help determine a submarket's success, is that the mix of housing going in. So where iStar has 35 acres in Asbury Park, we can't deliver all for sale housing. We're very focused and looking at rentals. We need a mix of different products and price points.
But you just brought up an interesting subject. The tax law changed. Taxes are up and you have a limitation. What effect do you see that on the for sale housing in the state of New Jersey?
It hasn't really impacted it quite yet. The question is what's the long term? What are the effects of the limitations on SALT? Some people might look at it and say it helped to drive absorption rates on the rental side, but I don't know. I think it's still too early to tell.
Here's a big question which I always bring out when I'm doing any residential show. How are you taking care of the working people and providing affordable housing?
I think that's New Jersey's challenge. One of the things that Rutgers has brought to light is that in the last decade, the housing product that's been built has catered to a certain household income. We as a state are challenged for affordable housing, both in terms of the legislatively, government mandated controlled rents, but also just in terms of workforce housing. And I think what I hope to see is, the excitement around the Opportunity Zone legislation. I think that will spur a tranche of workforce housing. That product will just inherently become more affordable.
Was there an affordable component required?
There is an affordable component that's required. I mean, it's a financial contribution in lieu of actually developing
Right, but
affordable housing on
but
site.
at least what I'm saying is at least the money is being applied to build somewhere else, okay? Which is what happened after 9/11 in Lower Manhattan, okay? Many of the properties did not have the affordable component, but there was financial incentives to build in other parts of the city or to build in other parts of the state.
Incentives are an important part of this. I mean, I think that Deb is right in saying that the state has an issue with affordable housing, and I think it's a partnership that's going to get this problem solved. It has to be the developers working with the local municipalities, working with the state government to create the proper incentive package to promote the development of affordable housing on site. From our perspective, we think that there is a solution here, but everyone has to come around the table and work together. Otherwise, you can't just make contributions, and you cannot just expect developers without incentives to build affordable housing.
I think the term is a public-private partnership, and I think that's what is necessary. And I think in certain parts in New Jersey it's taking place, and I think with the 4 people sitting over here, it's going to take place. I'd like to thank Deb, Jim, David, and Brian, and I'll see you next week.